And this doesn't mean get yourself into a meditation posture. This doesn't mean sitting like the Buddha or a yogi. This just means finding a position where you notice your body the least, where it's disturbing you the least. Then giving yourself permission to change your posture at any point during the practice. And to even turn off the sound if my voice is distracting you away from that place that you are already familiar with, that space of silence, of stillness, of being, of presence that each and every one of us has already tasted. Sometimes we taste that stillness, that peace, when we gaze upon a sunset or a sunrise, or when we're with our pets, when we're with our loved ones. Sometimes it might just be that scoop of ice cream, your favorite ice cream, where you find your mind aligning with your taste buds with your body, and your body here in this present moment. What is this practice about? What is this practice about? All of those circumstances that I mentioned, the sunset, the new car, the scoop of ice cream, staring into the eyes of someone we care about. They're all conditions that usually need to be satisfied on the outside. And then we begin to believe that we need these outside conditions to be satisfied before we experience this peace, this kindness, this unconditional, can we call it love? We begin to believe that the outside circumstances need to change. And we spend most of our lives attempting to change these outside circumstances. But this practice is a little bit of an experiment where we don't attempt to change anything. And you can't. You're sitting here. Most of us with our eyes closed. We're sitting, we're breathing. The house or the place we live in, still the same. The bank accounts, still the same. The bodies, still the same. We're going to see if we can experience that peace, that stillness, that kindness, that love. And when I use the word love, I try not to use it. You know that. When I use the word love, I simply mean it to indicate the connection that we have with each other. that oneness that we have not only with each other, but with the strangers walking outside your window, with the birds that are sitting on the tree outside your window, your door, the oneness with the tree, the oneness with the leaves on the tree, a connection that most of us have forgotten about, which is why we feel lonely and separated and sometimes even poor, simply because we identify our possessions, the way the world has led us to define abundance as. Instead, in this practice, the eyes are closed so that we can switch off from the visual distractions that usually stimulate thought. And to an extent, we've attempted to control many of the variables around us. The phones have been silenced or switched off. We've asked work colleagues or family members for privacy. Our bodies are moving a lot less than they were before. Like scientists, we begin an experiment where we begin controlling the variables that very often stimulate thought. So that we may observe our thought process. This practice has been given many labels, such as meditation, mindfulness. And we can release all of these labels and simply use it as an opportunity to observe the mind. A few days ago, I was reading a book by a Buddhist teacher, and he was asked by a student, what happens to the mind once I achieve enlightenment? Obviously, it's from a Buddhist perspective. So what is enlightenment? What does the enlightened teacher experience? And the response was that the mind continues to operate. The mind continues to think. Because there are still basic needs, such as the need to feed the body, to sustain the body, and in our case, to use our computers and to clothe our bodies and to connect in this way. So the mind continues to function. Because it has very practical uses. It has its place in our practice. But the difference being a separation begins to appear. We begin seeing our mind as something quite separate from who we truly are. We begin to see the mind almost as though it was no different from the clothing that covers our bodies. We begin to realize that we can choose the thoughts, just as we choose the clothing, the appropriate clothing to wear in response to the weather patterns, the temperature around us. In summer or in warmer climates, we wear breathable cottons. In the colder winters, especially when we're outside and outdoors, we wear thicker clothing with thermals, the appropriate shoes. We dress appropriately. And as we, using this practice, as we separate ourselves from our thought process, we begin to realize that we have the ability to choose our thoughts. You can notice that right now, you're sitting here breathing. You're in a practice. You signed up for this session today. It's called a mindfulness practice. It's called a meditation practice. But you'll notice that you might be thinking about a conversation that you had earlier on. You might be thinking about your bank balance. You might be thinking about one of your relationships, one of the labels the doctors has given us, given our bodies or our mind. Someone who suffers from so and so illness. Which ones are relevant to this practice? The bank account. Thinking about the bank account, not relevant. And so we release those thoughts. And then there's that other thought, that memory about a conversation that happened maybe during the Christmas holidays, maybe earlier today with a work colleague, a family member. So you're sitting here thinking about that conversation, that event. Is it relevant to this practice? And we're simply going to call this practice sitting and breathing. Sitting, breathing. So it's not really relevant. That event or that conversation is not relevant. So you begin to choose to release it. And then you have a busy plan, a busy schedule for later on today, a busy timetable. Is that relevant? No, it isn't. And then you release it. Notice how we're only getting the opportunity to release these thoughts because of the gap that has started to appear between the observer, the witnessing presence, and the mind. Now, which thoughts are relevant to sitting and breathing? Okay, breathing. From within the mind, you notice there's information about the breathing process, that it usually takes place within the nose. And so you extract that information from the mind. That is relevant to the present moment. And then you begin to to discover this process called breathing. It begins with the awareness of the nose. It begins with the awareness of the inner cells, the sensitive membrane within the nose, the nasal passage, the movement of air as it flows in and out. And the mind will still wander off to those plans that you have for later on. But you now have the ability to simply release it because it's not relevant to the present moment. And you bring your attention and your awareness back to the nose, back to the nasal passage. But it's still not yet an awareness of breath. It's just the awareness of the nose and the nasal passage and the inner workings of the nose. And then we go a bit deeper to the awareness of breath. And here it begins to, all you get is the direction. All you can tell about the breath is its direction, the direction in which it's moving, either in or out. And as you become aware of your breath, you find yourself extracting only thoughts that are relevant to this present moment, and your mind begins aligning itself into this eternal space called the present moment, where everything that has ever unfolded, from the earliest dinosaurs to the single-celled organisms that appeared on this planet, arrived and evolved, all occurring through this present moment. And as the gaps appear between witness, between presence, being, and the mind, you develop the ability to step outside of time. Becoming aware of the way in which time exists only within the mind. And the breath that is unfolding at this moment is unfolding in this present moment called the now. The mind aligning itself into the present moment, leaving its bank accounts behind, leaving all of those plans and conversations and stories and events. As you breathe in this present moment, and as you sit in this present moment, and now it's time to, the moment has arrived to extract a little bit more information from the mind as to what this posture called sitting is all about. Feel your body. Feel the bends around the joints, where your hands are placed, where your arms are placed, your shoulders. Some of you might be lying down, and that's perfectly fine. When I say exploring the posture, it doesn't matter what your posture is. But we're using our bodies as our doorways into the present moment, because we know that the bodies are present here in this moment called the now. You feel the bend around your knees. You feel the bend around your elbows and your finger joints. The placement of your shoulders, your spinal column, the way in which your neck balances your head. Notice as my voice describes these different body parts, you, the director, the witness, extracts information from the mind as to where the neck is, where the head is, what the finger joints are, where the elbows are, where the knees are. And gradually, like a child putting together one of those play sets, those Lego sets, you begin to make up your body. You begin to build up an image of your body through the various experiences entering into your awareness. And you begin getting a slightly deeper glimpse into the silence and the stillness and the kindness of this present moment. Why do I use the word kindness for the present moment? Because it is the space where you feel the very essence of your being. That life beyond the boundaries of your body and your form. That life that many of the teachers, and I think some of us have started to get glimpses into it, that very essence that exists within the leaves on the trees outside and the birds, and everything else. Those strangers who pass by outside our windows. I'm going to ring the bell now. Use the sound of the bell to allow the surfaces around your body to dissolve. simply because it's not that easy to distinguish. Have you noticed? When you tap into the present moment, there's a lot of effort involved in attempting to distinguish your body from your surroundings. Because very often we need to look in a mirror, we need to look at our hands, we need to look at our bodies, we need to look at each other to experience that separateness. But in this space with our eyes closed, there's a greater deal of effort in attempting to separate ourselves from each other, a greater effort in separating ourselves from our surroundings. And now we simply allow these two parts to merge into each other. I hope you can hear the bell. It's a bit further away than it normally is, but using the sound waves from this bell to move through our bodies, clearing any pockets of tightness and stress that we may still be holding within our bodies. If you are a more visual person, I think most of us are, which is why many teachers use metaphors. Just visualizing the sound waves that are emanating from this bell, visualizing to be like the little ripples, that appear on a still pond. When tiny pebbles are dropped onto the center. Because that is what sound waves look like. This stick I'm holding, which I'm using to stroke the bell, representing the tiny little pebbles dropping onto the center. And initially for most of us, because of how we see our bodies, we're going to imagine these sound waves reaching our bodies and then making their way around the bodies, almost as though our bodies were blocking these sound waves, almost as though our bodies were obstacles to these sound waves. But here we're going to bring in a little bit of science. So what do the scientists tell us? Our bodies are made up of atoms and molecules, no different from the air around us that is made up of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen. Now the only difference is that the atoms and molecules that make up our bodies, they're arranged in such a way, in quite a dense way, they're arranged quite closely together that they reflect light. Somehow creating an illusion of solidity. But nevertheless, atoms and molecules. And in between each and every one of these atoms and molecules is a vast amount of space. So much space that the very same scientists, they have calculated that our bodies, more than 99.9% of our bodies consists of pure space, which means these sound waves, we no longer need to force them to to move around us. We can simply invite them to move through our bodies. And so from this point onwards, as we hear the bell, inviting these sound waves to move into and through our bodies. You will still find these sound waves being caught up, being deflected by points within your body where you have kept quite rigid and tight. Sometimes they're muscles, sometimes it's skin. Just notice what's happening. Which parts of your body which areas of skin do you normally tense up when you're overthinking or worried or concerned? For some of us, it's the forehead. For some of us, it's the cheeks. Loosen these areas of skin. Allow these sound waves to bathe the cells and to move, to penetrate, to dissolve and loosen and undo these knots, whether they exist at the surface level or deeper within. It's so much easier dissolving and relaxing the skin and the muscles because we've practiced being more observant of them. But now these bells, the remaining bells, we want them to move deep into our body through the organs. The very core of our being, our hearts. The spleens and the liver that cleans and removes intoxicants from the food and drink that we consume. The kidneys, the spinal column, the brain, the eyes, with the pressure within the eyes balancing itself as all tightness and tension and pressure is released. And the ears, aware once again of the breathing process, aware of the bones that make up the jaws, relaxing the clench or the tightness within the jaws. Why are we moving through this practice? That's usually the question. The mind wants to know why, and that's a good thing. Because so many of us here, so many of those whom we love around us, have spent a whole lifetime so strongly identified with the mind. Believing ourselves to be the mind. And as when we had started this practice, we observed the mind, how it remembered conversations, events, plans, future plans. And if the memories were unpleasant, the body completely unable to distinguish between a thought and the present moment, believes those past memories to be happening right now in this present moment. And so we experience stress, worry, concern, various chemical imbalances occurring within the body as we think, as we remember, as we worry about the future. Tension begins to build up. The most visible, of course, being at the skin and muscular level, but much of it happening at a much deeper level, deep within the organs, the blood flow, the pressure. And that's what does a lifetime of identification with the mind do? It builds up these little pockets of tightness, of blockages within the body that literally turns into dis-ease, the opposite of ease, the opposite of allowing. The very cause of the pains and aches and illnesses that we experience through our bodies. But today, let us all enter into the present moment together, which is one of the most wonderful advantages of practicing together as a group. Together we build a new momentum. One that perhaps on our own we may not quite feel as strong and able to do. But now, your mind might wander. Your mind might go back to one of those events and conversations or plans. But there will be 10 other beings in this group who are present in this moment, who will bring you back into this space called the present moment. And it becomes a little bit easier to release those thoughts, that past, that future, and enter more completely and wholeheartedly into this present moment where you find this body sitting, breathing, and once again observing the thought process. This is where we remind ourselves that we are not here to force our minds to go still. We're not here to wrestle with our thoughts. We're not here to fight against our thoughts. We're simply here to develop a new relationship with our mind, with our thoughts, with our individual thoughts that have been woven together so that they now take the form of beliefs. beliefs as to what a meditation should be like, beliefs as to what our bank accounts should look like, beliefs as to what our bodies have to look like, and our relationship status, and so on and on and on. But all a part of the program that makes up the mind. And with the ringing of this bell, feel the space around every thought. What teachers often refer to when they speak of these, the space around the thoughts. There is a thought, and then there is a gap, and then another thought, and then a gap. Most of the time, we give more attention to the thoughts than the gap. Have you noticed? If you're looking up in the sky, just imagine, we use clouds as a metaphor. When you look up into the sky, we usually look for the form, don't we? We look at the clouds, we look at the shapes of the clouds, the colors. And not so much that space underneath the clouds, that vast amount of space between cloud and our eyes, which is so much more vast, so much more spacious. Now, if you were continuing to use clouds as a metaphor, initially when we began this practice, all as equals, all as beginners, all as practitioners who identified completely with the mind, it's a little bit like being carried by the cloud, right in the middle of the cloud. And you probably know I've been doing a lot of flying over the past few weeks. I remember returning back to London and the plane going through a thick coat of clouds. On either side of the clouds there was clarity, there was sunshine, there was space. And then the clouds. And the clouds seem to go on and on and on. And what does identification with the clouds feel like? It's those moments when you felt angry, sad, frustrated, impatient, lonely. Having identified ourselves as the cloud that is continuously moving. And what happens when you identify yourself as a cloud? You never experience that gap. Now, with this bell, stop moving with the cloud. Just stop moving with the cloud. Enter back into the present moment. Feel your body. Feel the points of contact between your body and the cushion and the mats underneath you. Feel your breath. Feel your clothing. Hear the sounds around you that represent the present moment. Not the imagined sounds, but the sounds that are surfacing. And that's the process of being present, no longer moving with the clouds. But because you're still in the middle of the cloud, there is no clarity. It's still very hazy. But something wonderful is emerging. The realization that it is the cloud that is moving and not the I, not the witness, not that who we truly are. And so whatever you may be going through right now, whatever the story your body and mind may be living, it is passing, and you are visiting. And then soon the gaps, they begin to appear. And we shift our attention from the clouds. What most of us are doing is we're continuing to observe the clouds even after it's left. We're still focused on the clouds. We're still focused on the upcoming clouds. We're looking at the clouds that have moved past, completely forgetting about this gap, this spaciousness, this stillness. And this is where this practice becomes most useful. We begin to experience and magnify this space. And this space, it can last for a very long time, because the present moment is eternal. Where there is no longer any attention to the upcoming clouds, there is no longer any attention to the clouds that have passed. There is just an attention of this space. And once you have tasted this space, once you have experienced it, just like the taste of your favorite chocolate, or your favorite ice cream, or your favorite cake, or your favorite flavors, you don't forget it, because it has been experienced. And so you no longer need to remember anything. There is nothing about this practice you need to remember. This is about experience. And so when the next cloud arrives, you cease identifying yourself with it. In a state of allowing, you allow the clouds to move. And pretty soon you begin to recognize, just like the pilot on the plane that I was on, you can move above the clouds, because the very same space exists both above and underneath the clouds. And you begin to not only recognize that you need to move, but you are that space. And so you begin to develop the ability to experience the clouds from above, from underneath, from the right, from the left. And this is where that ability to choose thoughts begins to emerge. Why do we want to choose our thoughts? Because the thoughts are like a filter through which we experience our present moment. a useful thought. Just as an example, if you're going through a turbulent period in your life, is that I don't know if I can call it a proverb that Eckhart Tolle often uses. This too will pass. This too will pass. And sometimes we use that analogy or that of the glass of water, the cup of water, the glass of water being either half full or half empty. The glass representing any of the circumstances in our life that we may currently be going through, any of the stories. Actually, whatever we're going through, it's neither good nor bad, neither full nor half empty. It just is. And using the glass of water, many of us, we use the filter, the thought. We choose a thought that sees the glass as half empty. That's usually pessimism. And then it brings about emotions such as worry, concern. It can be about our relationships, about our health, about our finances. And the body believes, remember, the body believes the thought to be true. And so we experience all of the emotions that feel quite unpleasant and uncomfortable. But as we rise above the clouds, as we begin inhabiting the space around the clouds, it doesn't happen immediately, but that's why they call it a practice. We begin developing the ability to choose different thoughts about the present moment. And in the analogy of the glass, another thought, an optimistic thought, one of hope. The glass is half full, and then we feel a bit of relief, a little bit of relief, a bit of comfort. Slight changes unfolding within our emotional state. Relief. Maybe not enlightenment, maybe not immediate smiles and laughter and joy, but just an improvement. Sometimes so subtle that those of us who are unpracticed may not even notice it. But the breathing slows down, the frown lessens, the tightening of the skin around the forehead loosens, the jaws begin to loosen. And we begin discovering our ability to separate our self from the story. Arriving into the present moment. More fully, more completely. than ever before. Allowing each intake of breath to represent a new beginning. And as you exhale, letting go of carbon dioxide, letting go of the past, letting go of the future, letting go of all of the thoughts, even that thought which tells you that you're having a good meditation or a bad meditation. Simply noticing those judgments and moving beyond, because even after the final bell in this practice, some of us will get back to work, some of us will get back to our relationships. The postman will arrive, there will be shopping to do, there will be food preparation. Some of these will stimulate thought. Sometimes in a nice way, sometimes in a less desirable way. And that does not mean the practice has ended. That does not mean the meditation is bad. That simply becomes an opportunity to stabilize ourselves deeper within this space called the present moment. Experienced as kindness. As a space of patience. Simply because you can no longer be impatient, waiting for an event to unfold. Because you have arrived here in this eternal present moment. And now the final bell, which we also call the true start to the practice, where we bring this experience of awareness and presence to this moment and to this moment, from moment to moment and breath to breath. Perhaps a little bit less dependent on the conditions, a little bit less dependent on that sunset, on what people say to us, on the approval that we get from the world or the relationships around us. Having experienced that stillness, that kindness, here, despite our eyes being closed, despite our surroundings still being very much the same, despite our bodies being completely the same, maybe with a few new cells, and a few old ones released, but an example of unconditional living. final bell. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. Deeply grateful to all of you for joining in today's practice, and so nice to see you, Shambho.
Thank you, Vinod. That was beautiful.
It's a pleasure. Thank you all for coming back. And
thank you, Vinod. It's the first time I can do the whole session with you.
Wonderful.
Know, you see him? Yeah. Usually he leaves after half an hour, so I think it's going to be a good year for him.
I'm so pleased to hear that. That's wonderful. Thank you again, my dear friends. And for those of you who are coming in from Jamyang, nowadays I'm having evening sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays as well. Jamyang won't have it on their website, but you'll find it on mindfulness.zone. So just so you know, if afternoon sessions are a bit difficult for you to attend. Take care, my dear friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Welcome back to all of you. Bye, Frank and Poonam. Take care.
Bye, Vinod.
Bye, Vinod.